We are live. Good evening, Susan.
Good evening.
I am so thrilled to be talking with you tonight. Thank you for taking a little time out of your incredibly busy day and life to come on Tea with Mimi.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very excited to be here. And I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you. So, as we're having folks gather in on YouTube and Facebook, I just want to introduce someone who needs no introduction. Susan Jaffe, former principal dancer of American Ballet Theater and current artistic director of ABT. American Ballet Theater. I have actually been thinking about talking to people outside of music for a very long time, and you were absolutely tops on my list just because I've admired your artistry for so long as a ballet fan. And then, of course, just following your trajectory with teaching and artistic direction is fascinating personally to me.
Thank you so much. Well, I think we would have a lot to share just about being an artistic director, you of your group and me of ABT. I mean, I also was the director of Pittsburgh Ballet Theater for 2 years and then a dean. So it's a really different experience being in a seat of leadership rather than, when you're a dancer or when you're a flutist, you have a leadership role regardless because you are taking an audience on a journey, right? So you're taking however many people in that audience. But in more administrative roles, it encompasses a lot more than really it being just about the art.
Absolutely. And it was just so fascinating chatting with you a little bit before this about our shared love and admiration for the Ballet Russe repertoire that I almost forgot to press the button to actually go live. So luckily, we're here with folks, and I'm going to just share a little bit of an official introduction to Susan Jaffe for those who are joining us. Called by the New York Times America's quintessential American ballerina, she was principal dancer at American Ballet Theater for 22 years and also guest performed with the Royal Ballet, Kirov Ballet, La Scala Ballet, the Royal Ballets of Denmark and Sweden, and the ballets of Vienna, Stuttgart, and many other places. Known for her interpretation of classic repertoire such as Swan Lake and Sleeping Beauty, she's also known for dramatic works choreographed by Anthony Tudor, Agnes de Mille, John Cranko, Kenneth Macmillan, and others, and for contemporary dances by such choreographers as Jerome Robbins, Merce Cunningham, Twyla Tharp, and Mark Morris. These are some incredible greats. After retiring as principal dancer at ABT in 2002, she taught at the ABT Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis School and was a director of repertoire at the company. And then in 2012 became Dean of Dance at the University of North Carolina School of the Arts. Then later in 2020, artistic director of the Pittsburgh Ballet Theater, leading this company through the pandemic, when in 2022, she was appointed artistic director of American Ballet Theater. So that's just a tiny summary of your fascinating career, Susan.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
To set the stage for everybody. And, I would actually love to just launch in with a little bit of a dance clip from your Don Quixote, from your kitchery, just so people get welcomed with a piece, and then we go from there into some chatting.
Sounds good.
For you, great. And I see people are joining. Victor Coco, so nice to see you. Thanks for your messages. And actually, I have to thank you for the delicious tea. I'm actually drinking a tea that Victor, this audience member and listener, sent me, Victorian London Fog by Harney and Sons. This is not a commercial. Delicious.
I gotta try that.
Yes. What are you drinking today, Susan?
I wish I could say that I was drinking tea, but currently I am drinking water.
The drink of champions.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay, so everyone, please say hi. You can say where you're listening from. Please ask questions and comments for Maestra Susan Jaffe, and also let us know if you're having some tea or something else.
σχολείς τώρα στο American Ballet Theater είναι η Susan Jaffe, σε ένα απόσπασμα από το Don Quixote.
Bravo! Wow!
Thank you.
I'm switching our audio. So we're back with our audio settings. Obviously stunning, gorgeous, and just such a bravura moment from the repertoire. It's a super famous Petrie solo with famous pirouettes and everything.
Yes, yes. I loved dancing Petrie. I loved her fiery humor and sharpness and strength, and her sort of a full sense of women empowerment within this story, and also I just love the style, the Spanish style of dance, with all the arms, So I really enjoyed Petrie a lot.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit before about how you're in many ways known as a classicist. Would this be one of those classics of the Russian repertoire in addition to the Tchaikovsky pieces?
Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So I am fascinated by the story of how Mikhail Baryshnikov had you go when you were 18 as on the main stage, right? Last minute performance. And it seems like right after that, you became a principal dancer. I'd love to know a little bit about both that and even just how you knew you wanted to be a dancer as a child, perhaps, like to start at such a young age is fascinating.
Yeah. And you were also quite a young prodigy. So you would really understand all of this. Well, let me just start with childhood. When I was about 7 years old, my mother asked me if I wanted to take dance classes at the local YMCA, which was basically across the street. And so I said, sure. And I went to the class, and it was a modern dance class at the time. And so we were doing things like pretending to be an ice cream cone melting, or a dog basking in the sun, or rolling around on the floor. And, when I was a kid, I was quite precocious in thinking that I was either going to be a famous actress, or I was going to be a famous singer, or I was going to be a princess, a real one. And so there I was rolling around on the floor, and I thought to myself, is this what a princess does? And I said, no, this is not what a princess does. And so across the hallway, I saw the ballet class, and they were so pretty, and they had those little crisscross ribbons around their ankles, and their hair was up all tidy, and they looked so elegant. And I said to my mother, that's what I want to do. I want to be that. And I had grown up watching, reading Swan Lake, with Ballet, with the photographs, and Sleeping Beauty and things like that. So I had seen all of that. And so she put me in the ballet class. So I was, 7.5, just turning 8. And, for the first couple of months, your little 7-year-old brain, it's hard to focus that well. But suddenly something shifted, and I became very focused and started working really hard. And one day, soon after, I had a dream. And in this dream, I was being raised in the air by my partner, who I couldn't see below me because I was being raised in the air. And there was a big spotlight on me. And I looked down and all of my classmates were running around me in a circle. And my little brain said, I'm a star. And I woke up the next morning and my legs were killing me as if I had danced all night. And so I was literally, and I'm sure this happened to you, just as if arrows pierced me in the heart with an arrow. And I fell madly and deeply and passionately in love with ballet. Mm-hmm. And so my mother the next year sent me to because the teacher there said, you have to send her to a real ballet school. This is just the YMCA. And so she put me in a real ballet school, and the teacher, said I was very talented. And in fact, I did my first Swan Lake at the school when I was 13. And then when we were about 13 years old, 14 years old, she brought us up for auditioning for summer intensives in New York. And I won a scholarship to School of American Ballet when I was 13. And so I went there for the summer, and I absolutely loved it. And I loved Balanchine, and I loved all of those things. But I thought about it over the year, and I said, I really want to tell stories. Mm-hmm. I want to be a storyteller. And not that Balanchine works don't have any storytelling, but I wanted to tell Swan Lake, and I wanted to tell Giselle and the Sleeping Beauty. And so the following year, I went to American Ballet Theater. So I was there for the summers. When I was 16, I joined the second company of ABT. So I was there for 2 years. And then when I was graduating from Studio Company, it was called Ballet Repertory Company at the time. Now it's called the Studio Company. Baryshnikov, we had heard that he was taking over ABT. And so he came and he watched our class in the morning. And the rehearsal director came up to me afterwards and she said, Misha thinks you're very talented.
Wow.
And so, that was kind of shocking. I remember being so shocked. I turned around because I thought maybe she was talking to somebody else. And I auditioned for the company properly, and I got into the company. That was in August of 1980. And so at the time, actually right now, I'm at American Ballet Theater Studios here at 890 Broadway. It's the Michael Bennett building. But at the time, this wasn't even available yet. And we were dancing, we're rented studios at Carnegie Hall. Anyway, Misha started giving me roles right away. I was learning a lot of principal roles, and I was brand new in the company. And of course, that made me not very popular. But I had to just keep my head down and keep focused. 3 months later, we were opening at the Kennedy Center. So we had a big 3-month rehearsal period, and we were opening in the Kennedy Center. And the two biggest stars of the company didn't show up to the dress rehearsal. Wow. And so Misha fired them because they had a history of drug use.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So he fired them, and he came up to me and he said, how would you like to go on in the place of this major ballerina? And you'll dance with Alexander Godunov. And he was the last defector of Russia. I don't know, you may not be old enough, but I remember when I was a kid and the plane was waiting on the tarmac because Sasha wasn't on it. And the Bolshoi Ballet was waiting for him to come. And they waited for like 6 hours. And then finally they took off and they left. Wow. So he was very famous. So Misha said to me, how would you like to go on in the place of this ballerina and dance with Alexander Godunov? And I said, oh, thank you very much. That's very, very kind of you, but I'm 18. I just joined the company. I haven't even had my first performance yet. I'm supposed to be the fifth girl in the back, wearing character shoes. And he just laughed and he said, "Oh, you'll be fine." And so
That's an incredible story. And then, yeah. Wow. Well, I mean, it's fascinating to hear you tell it from the time you had that prophetic dream as a young child. It's beautiful, and I totally relate. And also, like, you credit my mother with exposing me to music at a very young age. My parents took us, my brother and me, to Boston Symphony all the time, and I went to my brother's youth orchestra rehearsals. He's 8 years older than me, and saw my mother playing clarinet and wanted to play as well. So then when I was 5, my mom taught me how to play recorder and how to read music. And within a year, I told my parents I wanted to play the flute. So kind of similarly, I felt the flute I fell in love with it. Like, it was my voice within music. And I think they were happy not to have a third clarinetist in the house. But and even in the sense that I never looked back, just like fell so much in love and loved the music, loved the performing. And then when I was 12, and that legendary flutist Julius Baker, by chance at a National Flute Association convention where I had already had him as my favorite flutist, whose sound I wanted to emulate since the time my mother brought a recording of his home, he asked me to play out of the blue. And after I did that, I started studying with him, and he changed all of our lives by having me come and audition and then study with him at Curtis. But I loved hearing the story of that recognition of what you want to do at such a young age. And then, of course, with your story with Mikhail Baryshnikov having you go right on stage, that's so incredible. And as they say, I guess the rest was history. But such an amazing time, as you mentioned, with Godunov as a defector, and I guess Baryshnikov himself and Makarova. As we were just chatting, in the prima ballerina assoluta that I have met and actually, not really studied with because I'm not a dancer, but Maya Plisetskaya of the Bolshoi, I had met in Switzerland when we were playing a piece by her husband, Roderick Shedrin, that involved theatricality and walking around, and she coached us, and that was just unbelievably memorable. And I think it kind of reactivated my ballet passion as well, getting to this point. But I'm just so thrilled to be able to get some of your thoughts also about music and ballet and how that plays literally such a key role. And maybe we talked a little bit about Swan Lake. I'd love to share perhaps some of your White Swan, and then maybe talk a little bit about, of course, however you want to take it, but in this idea of the communication of the story, as you mentioned, through the choreography, through the music. It would be just great to hear your thoughts, because this is an incredibly expressive and beautiful moment of this excerpt that we've shared. Bravo, brava.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So exquisite, Susan. Oh my gosh. I mean, what is it like to hear that gorgeous music? I mean, you have so much to think about technically. Are you thinking of the story? What are you thinking when you do that and move us so much?
Oh, well, thank you. Uh, well, the white swan, so you'll see in this solo that she keeps going that way and she keeps running back that way. So her whole thing is that upstage left, which is when you're in the audience, it's to your right, which is closest to the back. Upstage left to downstage right, so it's on your left and at the closest to the audience. She has this idea that upstage left, and that's where she enters at the beginning of the ballet when she transforms into a swan. So she lands from that corner. And for her, that's safety. That is, it may not be a happy existence, but it is the existence she knows. And who knows, maybe she's been there for 100 years. She's been captured. She's been trapped, imprisoned for 100 years. And the downstage is freedom, is change, is she's going to have to make changes in order to break out of the being imprisoned. So she has this whole thing where she keeps trying to go here, but then she runs back and she runs over here and she runs back. And it's her whole angst. She's just met, this beautiful prince. She feels depth for him. He feels depth for her. And she is asking herself all of these questions. Should I trust him? Is he trustworthy? Should I try to break this spell? The only way that the spell gets broken in Swan Lake is if he swears his love to her and marries her. And so that's the betrayal in the third act, where Odile, who looks like Odette, pretends to be Odette, and then he swears his love to Odile. And so that's where the entrapment comes from. So that this solo sort of represents her angst about, should I trust, should I not? So this is a whole new experience for her. So yeah, there's a lot of technical things you have to think about, but there's also the music that takes you. And, I wanted to talk to you about that because I see that when I watch you perform, I see you absolutely embody the music, the flavor, the depth, the dimension of the music. It's all in your music. And I will never forget, this is way back. I was asked to perform for an inauguration from one of our presidents. And I was to dance The Dying Swan with Yo-Yo Ma.
Amazing. Which president?
It was Bush Sr.
Okay, fantastic.
And so before I was to go on stage, and the stage was tiny, it was like this big, Yo-Yo played one or two songs and he was already on the stage. And there were these big jumbotrons. And it was a stadium where you would enter from all these different like octagonal shape to come onto the stage. But so these big jumbotrons, and there was Yo-Yo Ma just absolutely embodying the music. Mm-hmm. And I remember, instead of being, I was fully inspired, but then I thought, how will I ever be able to embody the music with that much, just depth and meaning? And I remember just being absolutely terrified to go on stage, but we did it. And even though I didn't have any space, it was one of the highlights of my life, to be able to do this performance with him. So it's when I think that dance, and not just ballet, but dance is music in motion. And so as a dancer, it's incumbent upon you to reflect the feeling of that music, to reflect the all the intonations, the ups and the downs, the little minor things you hear in the background, just literally soak it all in so it becomes part of your DNA. And for me, the music drove the story. You know, it drive, you know, you can't just dance on the music. There's a really, really, really big difference between dancing on the music or being the music. And, you know, of course, with ballet like Swan Lake, it's being with the music, being the music, and also weaving in the character and their story. So that's how I think about that.
Well, I'm so excited hearing how you describe it as embodying the music, and thank you for what you said about, you know, musicians when we do this, because that's exactly how I think of it, in the sense that music is such a powerful form of communication without words, like truly universal. And then you dancing to music, but also through your body communicating literally without words. There's that kinship there that I feel so strongly. And literally, you know, as a flutist, my mouth is busy as a wind player, but the breath is so key, you know, to life. I feel. I think all instrumentalists think this about their instrument, but we are the closest instrument to the human voice is flute. But I think all of us really try to emulate the voice. And sometimes, whether I'm playing Carmen Fantasy, for example, where my line gets to be different characters from Carmen, we literally can have a sense of theatricality, or just playing what we call absolute music, where there's not a story, but we feel the emotion, or we might imbue it with that sense of narrative. We feel very strongly, I think, that, and that's
Yeah, absolutely. And also it's so fun for me to just, you know, watch different musicians interpret even the same piece of music in such a different way, and really getting their take on something, that for me it's so fascinating to hear all the different inflections or the different points of view about how that music should be played or what should be emphasized within that. And how, you know, for me, the most important thing is, whether it's dance or music, is that it has to be authentic, has to come from the heart. You know, if it doesn't come from the heart, it's dry. It's just not alive.
Yeah. Wow. So actually, in what you were saying, we have a wonderful choir director on listening, Rick Rosen, who commented, he particularly connected with what you said about storytelling and what you said about embodying the music. So that's, I think we have a lot of this interdisciplinary connection with singing and playing and dancing and everything. But something I've always wondered, I mean, when you're on stage, you're pretty busy, you're doing tough stuff. I think we all agree on that. And obviously you rehearse a lot, right? And meet with the conductor and everything. But I know, like, we never really play anything exactly the same twice. Within reason, we keep our tempos. How do you communicate live on stage with a conductor? What if there's a tempo that it's not what you want? What if, you know, that kind of thing? And, or even best case scenario, how are you communicating? How do you make changes, or how do you go with inspiration in the moment?
Yeah, I mean, usually once you get out there, and the conductor's pretty busy too, there really isn't. I mean, the best ballet conductors, and I just have to tell a story about my ex-husband, who is a ballet conductor. And he was a conductor here at ABT, and we met when we were both very young. And he used to look down on ballet music. And, oh, you know, ballet, you know, and he always had these aspirations to, you know, be a symphonic conductor. And so we would argue about tempi because he was my conductor before we were married. He was my conductor. And I would say, you know, you've got to look at me. You know, otherwise my entrechats and Giselle, you're going way too fast for any human body to actually be able to do that tempo. And so I remember when he finally had the opportunity to conduct in a symphony. And he went off to Europe somewhere and he did that. And when he came home, he said, I just realized I don't gravitate toward that. What I gravitate towards is being part of a whole, being part of a ballet, being part of a whole story and communicating with the dancers. And after that, he became a much better ballet conductor.
Great story.
Yes, because you really have to understand that conductors need to understand how a body moves, how it moves in this story, how it's supposed to move dynamically, and all of those things. And so they do come to rehearsals a lot. They know the ballets very well. They know the different casts very well. And so they know us pretty well. Sometimes when they get out there, and us too, the adrenaline takes over and it might be a little faster than we've ever worked on it before. And that can be challenging because, you know, you can't really communicate with the conductor at that moment. He or she has a huge orchestra in front of them and all those things. So you just have to adapt and modulate and, you know, and figure it out. And that's, as you know, what live performance is all about. You know, it's not about being rigidly stuck to what you thought was going to happen. You have to be in the moment, right? And that's where the magic happens, right?
Absolutely. No, exactly what you're saying. It's rarely slower. I think adrenaline will always take us just a few notches up in tempo. But magical things do happen in communication with others. And actually, this is getting me to Black Swan and partnering, because I'm just thinking having this when you're partnering with someone and you're obviously doing the ballet and the music is happening and the conductor is there and the players, that probably adds a whole other level, I'm thinking, that I'd love to hear about. But I'm going to put on a little bit of Black Swan. It might be a little spotty. We want to hear the whole solo, but like we might hear some in chat and then maybe get some fugues in there as well.
Okay.
Okay. And no good place to pause here during that exquisite music, but also just want to point out the concertmaster solos of Tchaikovsky ballets were often composed for Leopold Auer, who was the teacher of Jascha Heifetz and many other violinists. And I think he also briefly taught at the Curtis Institute of Music, so not just in Russia, but in the United States. So there's this whole lineage in the playing too of that amazing music. But wow, such a gorgeous performance of yours with Vladimir Malakhov, and just like we just saw Little White Swan, and you're conveying that whole other seductive energy here through your body and through your movement, feeling the music. But yeah, anything you want to share about that and partnering, I'd love to know.
Oh, yeah. Well, first of all, I love those violin passages in Swan Lake.
Mhm.
And actually, for me, in Swan Lake is my favorite ballet. Musically, just the very beginning, the very opening, when it just has that shimmer, and then it has the theme, da 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 da. It's just gorgeous. And it's funny because when Tchaikovsky said, was it Tchaikovsky, he said, I would have never composed Swan Lake if I had heard the score of Sylvia first by Dalib.
Wow.
And thank goodness he never heard the score of Sylvia before Swan Lake, because I love the score of Swan Lake. So yes, and it absolutely feeds the musicality, feeds the character, feeds that energy and the emotion of what we're trying to convey. So it absolutely, to me, it just fuels the whole thing. And so, yes, working with Vladimir and any of my partners, you really have to, you work with, what's the word? You're pushing and pulling and rhythm and balance and counterbalance, and just, you absolutely have to be one with each other.
Wow.
And so I just have this very funny story about I always had great partners, and it's when the partner knows what they're doing and they're telling the story with you, and there's a sense of absolutely working with you and your energy. That's when it works the best, and that's where you can actually connect emotionally the best. But I do have this funny story about this. He was a very famous star, and he was coming to ballet theater, and he was dancing with me in The Sleeping Beauty, and it was just the third act. And he was so funny. He was not, actually wasn't European, and he had this sort of very macho thing that he was doing in the studio, and just sort of prancing around. And he was very kind to me, and paid a lot of attention to me. And I remember thinking, oh, I'm going to be working with this kind of energy on stage. Okay, fantastic. I know exactly how to work with that. And so he got out on stage, and he turned into a deer in headlights.
Wow.
And his hands turned into ice cubes, and he was just frozen. And I was so shocked, because he had such a confident energy in the studio. And then he just became this different, and, to his credit, or to his defense, he was dancing at American Ballet Theater for the first time. And, but it really made me realize how hard it is to be a partner.
Did he warm up and relax as
I had to talk to him under my breath the whole time, like, oh, hello. Oh, do you want my hand now? Like I tried to get him to calm down. I don't remember if he ever did, but, and I just wanted to, the most important thing in dance is to connect with your eyes.
Yeah.
Because if you don't connect with your eyes, as you know, the eyes are the window of the soul.
Yeah.
So if you have a partner who's looking at you like this or
Oh,
like this, it's really hard to have a heart connection. And that's the whole deal. I guess we talked about before. That's the whole thing. So you really have to work very hard to not only get all the mechanics done well, but know each other well enough, trust each other well enough to have a real heart connection.
yeah, I could see that the chemistry is so important on stage.
Mm.
Funnily enough, with my duo partner, pianist Charles Abramovic of more than 20 years, we play recitals together where we never see each other's eyes because he's kind of here, but it's like the sound communicates the ears, and he sees all the breathing, and we sense the breathing, and it's so in music though, when we are in a place, I do love the eye contact. I think it truly does
Yes.
communicate, and I do see him actually sometimes.
Yeah.
I know what you're saying. It must be extremely intimate to dance with someone in that way, on all levels, and
Absolutely. But I do think also just with musicians, when I hear a whole orchestra breathe together.
Yeah.
And actually there was, of course I can't remember the name of the orchestra, but they were from Asia, and it was at Carnegie Hall. And boy, do I always feel so lucky to be sitting in that hall listening to music. It's just like one of the most incredible things in the world. And it was an Asian orchestra, and the conductor put his baton up and then put his baton down, and they all meditated for about 3 or 4 minutes. And it just started building the energy between them all.
Mm-hmm.
You could actually feel their connection, because as you know, an orchestra has to breathe as one.
Yeah, exactly.
And you could feel the energy building and building and building, and it was wafting. I started crying. It was amazing.
Yeah.
So then they all went and hit the first note, and it was one of the most ecstatic experiences I had ever had. It was amazing.
That does sound just super inspiring and amazing. And even just, I was thinking about the physicality of making music or making dance. Like, I never mind if you hear normal breathing from an ensemble, whether they're wind playing or not. It's like we're human beings making the music. And same with dance. Well, I've never been close enough to hear dancers breathing, but like shoe noise. That's amazing. I mean, I think, I don't know if it's controversial in your field, but I think it's wow. Look what they're doing, if you hear some point shoes.
Yeah, no, you should not be hearing point shoes. When you played the video, I thought, oh my gosh, those point shoes are so loud.
Oh my gosh. Oh, but this is actually perfect segue to a question from Ronnie Gordon, who is my mother and board chairman of Dolce Suono Ensemble. So when she is not writing foreign language learning textbooks with my dad, she works with me on the ensemble, which is awesome. But she writes, Susan, gorgeous dancing. What is some of your favorite music on stage and off stage? And I would love to know that too.
Okay, so I have a tendency to become obsessed with things. Luckily, they're all healthy obsessions. So one year, I just became obsessed with the Goldberg variations.
Yes.
Absolutely obsessed. And I wanted to listen to all the different interpretations, like Robert Gould and all the different. And every night when I came home and I made my dinner, I turned on the Goldberg variations. And it lasted for about a year, and then after that, and I just loved how the variations just became more and more complex, and how the initial theme, and for me, that was like the most sublime piece of music. And I loved how as Gold got older, it got slower and slower. The theme, it was really interesting. When he was young, it was really, really fast, that beginning theme. And then as he got older, it just became this beautiful, like droplets of water on the keys. It was gorgeous. Then I became obsessed with Beethoven, and I had headphones walking up and down the street to the Met to perform. And, and I became obsessed with, I loved, my favorites were the Seventh Symphony. And then, of course, I fell in love with the Sixth and then the Ninth. And, those were my favorites out of the whole Beethoven symphonies. But I did that for about 2 years. I had to listen to it every single day. So I'm an obsessive listener, Then I went on to Sinatra for a year, Frank Sinatra, so I have these things where I just want to hear something to its depth, So yes, and Bach, nothing better than Bach. I mean, it's all a Tchaikovsky. They're all incredible pieces of music. And I will, at times in my life, just become focused on one and focused on another. So
all fantastic choices, and I can totally relate to the repeated listening and obsession listening. And it's interesting you mentioned the Goldberg variations of Bach. Our ensemble just presented them in the arrangement for string trio by Dmitri Sitkovetsky.
Oh,
which is also absolutely stunning.
Oh.
That was inspired by the Glenn Gould performances. So,
oh, fantastic! Is that on YouTube? I'll have to look that up.
there's a clip of it, but let me send you the concert video.
Oh, fabulous!
Yeah, it's such a major undertaking, that work too. But we did great arrangements. We had pieces not in their original form, which works for me as a flutist because we have a smaller repertoire than piano and strings. And so it was fun to do that. But yeah, that's fascinating to know. I want to ask you in a moment about teaching. And I think something that sometimes makes me sad when I think about careers in ballet is that at some point, ballet dancers retire, physically because of the demands. Did you always know you wanted to teach?
No. No.
Yeah.
I remember as I was nearing the end of my dancing career, I said, there are 3 things I'll never do. I'll never teach, I'll never choreograph, and I'll never come back as the queen. So first I came back as the queen, which was meaning that there's a queen in Swan Lake and she walks and she does a little walk around the stage and then she sits and she watches the whole act. And the reason why I did the queen, because I had to do it in Sleeping Beauty, because Kevin Mackenzie, who was the previous artistic director, he said to me, help, I have all these injured dancers and I need every single healthy dancer to be dancing. Would you please come and do the queen? And oh, okay. So I did the queen in Sleeping Beauty. And
Yes.
So the reason why I thought I would never teach is because what I didn't realize, and I always try to be very pragmatic about myself. And so I said, well, no, I'm too self-centered because, I only wanted to enhance myself. Well, what I didn't realize was that, of course, I had to be like that as a ballet dancer. I've got to get my food. I've got to get my massage. I've got to get my physical therapy. I've got to do that research. I've got to make sure I get enough sleep. It was all about getting on stage.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, and that took up the whole rest of my day besides rehearsing. Right.
Yeah.
And so when I retired from dancing, they were opening the school here at ABT and they asked me to come and teach. And I said, oh no, I won't be good at it. And the new director said, oh, come on, just try it for a few months. If you hate it, you can stop. Like, okay. So I started teaching. And what I realized was that I loved helping others. And I loved imparting the information and I loved empowering young people. And what that, when you see a young person have an aha moment, there's nothing better in the world. And so I went from thinking, oh no, I'm only self-centered to, oh my gosh, giving to young people is the best thing in the world. Like I couldn't be any luckier than to be somebody who has the knowledge to impart. And so I fell madly in love with teaching.
That is so wonderful, and of course, extremely successful with it during your tenure as Dean of Dance at UNC and all the other teaching that you did. How well, you know what? I'm going to put in this incredible moment because how could we talk and not have this moment? I'll kind of hit near it, if not right on it, and then I have another question for you about that.
Okay.
Wow, bravissima.
Thank you.
And obviously to Vladimir Malakhov as well. It's so incredible. Super famous major moment. I could, yeah, of the Odile and all the fauteuils and everything. So it's just great to see that and to share that. And yes, I loved how you said you just being able to impart from your vast experience to others and inspire the next generation. You're getting wows on the comments, absolutely. Anyway, but yeah, and that's I was just thrilled to hear that because it's something that my teachers always imparted to me. Both my parents are professors, my wonderful teachers at Curtis, Julius Baker, Jeffrey Kaner, just such a generosity, I think, of passing it on to the next generation that I got to benefit from. And then just learning in music, like I always say, if you're doing it right, you learn your whole life. In different ways, both in school and out. And so it's really something I feel passionate about. I'm very privileged to teach. And something I think about a lot, you mentioned, and I think there's parallels with teaching music, like you did something about not just being on the music or with the music, but like acting out, fulfilling, embodying the music, that magic. How do you teach that?
You know, this is interesting. So there was a very, very famous ballet dancer named Margot Fontaine. And she, I never got to see her live, but and, you know, during most of my youth, you know, we didn't have access to YouTube. But she did come to ABT. And she coached me in a ballet called Birthday Offering by Sir Frederick Ashton. And she came, she was so elegant. You know, she had her hair pulled up and pearls and, you know, a beautiful suit on and little high heels. And just, she was so elegant. And I remember just being absolutely dumbstruck. I just couldn't. But we were rehearsing, and at one point she said to me, "Darling, just be on the music. That's all I ever did."
Wow.
And she meant it. She actually meant it, but she meant it in such a much deeper way. And so, like, when I watch her on YouTube, and I urge everyone to look up Margot Fontaine, Fonteyn. she is one of the deepest musicians I've ever seen, because it's like her finger is the violin, her eyebrow is the cello, her foot is the flute, every aspect of the music is embodied. And it's just, she is the most perfect example in ballet. Now, there are some great, like Mark Morris, I think, is one of the most musical people in the world as well, in a very different way. But to actually understand a dancer who absolutely embodies the music and is the music.
Yeah.
So when you are working with a dancer, right now I'm working with some of the young principals of the up and comings, and I try to describe, yes, of course you have to be on the music, and it's always better to be, for a dancer, it's always to be slightly in front of the note. Like, you're in front of the note, then you'll actually get to the note by the time your foot gets on the floor. But that you have to have a point of view about what you're doing. Like, you can't just execute the steps. What do you feel about this step? What do you feel about this variation? What do you feel about this adagio? What's your view? And then that's when you start to get them to start to feel something authentic within themselves, right? And you have to keep pulling it out, keep nurturing it, and celebrate it when it starts to show up, so that they become more and more trusting of their own authentic view of the music. So you can't always teach somebody who's not musical to be musical. You can teach them to be on the music. But usually that kind of dancer would not get into ABT.
I see. No, I see what you're saying, especially this idea of being able to tell the story. And it's so interesting what you're saying about not, more than steps. Of course, one thing that we try to do in the music is this idea of the legato, or just the connection, the seamlessness. And yes, as music unfolds. So there's so many parallels here in a fascinating way. Harkening back to what we were just getting into before we went live about artistic direction and how you have found a love for programming and planning the performances of the companies you've directed, something that I absolutely love to do as artistic director, this idea of having a vision and carrying it out. What excites you the most right now about that?
Yeah. So when I was the dean at the University of North Carolina School of the Arts, I was overseeing both ballet and contemporary divisions. And so I really started to get become really fascinated and in love with contemporary movement as well. And so what I would program there, I would program 2 pieces for the ballet, 2 pieces for the contemporary students. And so we would do these programs together. And I remember thinking, this is so much more interesting than just seeing a whole evening of ballet. And so I do like to have, I don't really necessarily go all the way down to postmodern, where people are in bare feet and parallel. And, it's very fascinating and it's wonderful, but it's not, I would think that, like, when a ballet dancer trains their legs all day long, you don't want to not use that training, right? You want to use that training. And there's so many great works out there that uses that training. So I like to program contemporary ballet, so a balletic base and then contemporary upper body. So I always like to start off with a classic piece, classic ballet for the repertory, and then do maybe 1, maybe 2 works of contemporary shorter works, and then end with a big classic piece. So for me, that keeps the eye engaged, because these evenings can be 2.5 hours long. They're long, right? So you always want to be kept off guard a little bit. But also, Mimi and I were talking about this earlier, like making a theme around an evening, and how, even if they're very different pieces, how do you thread that together to market in a way that people want to come see it and find a deeper meaning in it? So, for example, this year, 2025, is American Ballet Theater's 85th anniversary. So we have a new co-production, which is wonderful, coming into our summer season at the Metropolitan Opera House. And all of those works at the Met are full-length ballets, story ballets. Mm-hmm. When we go into the Koch Theater, David H. Koch Theater, in October of 2025, that's where I'm really going to emphasize the 85th anniversary. So one of the evenings is going to be called ABT of the Past. So you walk into the theater and we'll have videos or film clips around it and explaining the whole history of all of it, like a 5-minute thing, where you're going to see a piece by Les Sylphides, which is something that Lucia Chase, the original founder of this company, loved. Les Sylphides, a classic romantic ballet. And then the second piece is a ballet by Anthony Tudor. And then the last piece is a piece by Agnes de Mille. So it will be called ABT of the Past. And you just sit there and you think, imagine walking into the theater in 1945. This is the ballets. These are the ballets. And these were all, not Les Sylphides, but certainly the Tudor piece and the Agnes de Mille piece, you know, there was so much that was choreographed on ABT by those two artists. So that will be something. So like the whole repertory is all about ABT and what we've done. So we'll have a whole evening for Twyla Tharp.
That's so fantastic. And I love the historical programming, because just in every art form, it seems like the program themes have changed over the years, or programming styles. So it's so nice to do that retrospective feel. And I know we talked about having a kernel of an idea that you then get to carry out on stage. And I think the longest gestation period for a project we did on lesser known, important, and excellent American chamber music was 7 years. It doesn't usually take that long, but there's this idea that we have a theme, whether we're celebrating composer anniversaries. We did a project on Mahler and Schoenberg, Samuel Barber, one of my favorites, Debussy, or a project on the Holocaust and music related to that, or interdisciplinary things with visual art. We once had dancers, actually, and something too. But there will be a theme there that just kind of really excites us. And I also like the blending of older and newer repertoire that you mentioned, and that we also love having. So this is absolutely fascinating. I'm going to invite you to our next concerts in Philadelphia in March and June, and also to all our listeners. Please follow everyone we mentioned in our companies on the internet. Also, if you're joining late or want to revisit this show, it stays up as a video, so you can share it with your friends. Everybody, thanks for listening. I have a 10-second clip that you probably did not expect before I say goodnight, and I'm going to put this on. This is probably very unusual.
Oh, that is fantastic. I love that.
It's 2 pirouettes while playing the flute. I can't believe I just showed you that. Okay, anyway.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's on your Instagram?
It is, yes. It was just in honor of World Ballet Day a couple years ago. And I just like a moment.
I love it.
I am so inspired by what you do. I am so inspired by you, Susan. Thank you for gracing us on Tea with Mimi with your artistry and wisdom and experience. And it was just such a joy to speak with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You know, I have such tremendous respect for everything that you do. You as a musician, as an educator, as somebody who brings new works to life, and just everything you do. So it's been such a joy to be here with you on this.
Thank you so much. I can't wait to meet you in person. But thanks for joining me this evening. Thanks everybody for being here. And I can't wait to see your works and you again soon.
Yes. Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night.